So throughout the journey of this podcast, I've spoken to a lot of founders that are scaling their own businesses. And that's, obviously who I relate to most closely. But there's obviously the other dynamic where, you buy a business that's already functioning quite well and then scale it even further. And what I want to know is, why would one do that, and what would that look like? How would it be different? How is it different to scaling your own journey? And also, how can we get those lessons and how can we apply them to our own businesses and our own strategy moving forward? So for that reason, I'm going to be chatting to the CEO and acquirer of Lanteria. His name is Andrew Swiler, and I think this is going to be quite an insightful conversation.
When you don't have that emotional attachment to the person, a lot of the attachment you have to them is more from their knowledge and their history with the company. To say, if I get rid of this person, I'm losing some pretty important knowledge about the company that I might not know. There's a lot, you step into a company, there's a lot of blind spots. It's like, you don't know 100% of what happened. You don't know 100% of the code base. You don't know 100% of like what they did in marketing before. You don't know what their sales executives, did before. So if you get rid of that, that's institutional knowledge that you're losing. So a lot of the attachment you have to the employees is just knowledge, where for a founder, the attachment is emotional, where it's, I paid this person maybe less than they deserved. They bet on me, I bet on them. And you have that emotional attachment where for me, it's more of, I can let go of this person. I'll be able to sleep at night. So it makes it easier there in that really difficult phase. And I would say, frankly, people are the most difficult part of building any business. And so the emotional attachment not being there makes it easier to interchange people.
Welcome to The Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Hey Andrew, welcome to The Founder Files. I've spoken a lot about topics around scaling, but I think this is the first conversation that I'm going to have with someone who's looking to scale the business after they've acquired it. All right. So I think this is a conversation I'm really looking forward to. And obviously you bought into your business, 2022. And so now I think it's been enough time that you've really, gotten into the midst of it. So I think can you give me a bit of context to yourself in terms of why now is the right timing for me to be talking to you about this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me on. So it's the right time because there's a huge wave of entrepreneurship right now that's moving towards sort of this bootstrap model. I know, VC money is kind of drying up. Some people are running into issues where they did raise VC money and now they need to start thinking about how do they exit? What's the next step? Because that next round of financing isn't coming around. So there's these alternative sort of exits or alternative universes that they're looking towards. But at the same time, there's a big wave of entrepreneurship because of that is focused on profitability, building, sustainable businesses. But at the same time, that type of entrepreneur hits certain plateaus. Sometimes, they reach 1 million ARR, they reach 3 million ARR, and they don't want to do what's required in that next phase. And that's when someone like me steps in, or someone like another private equity firm steps in, where they have the capital and they have the know-how to take it from that sort of initial phase, or the 0 to 1, or the 0 to 1 million, or 0 to 3 million, whatever you want to call it, and actually scale it sort of that next level where the founder basically says, I don't want to hire an account executive team. I don't want to hire SDRs. I don't want to do, the structuring, do EOS, or do scaling up and really work on that. I just want to build cool products. And that's pretty common. Like, they just hit that phase and they don't want to be Mark Zuckerberg. They just want to be a guy that made good money and move on to the next business. So that's why I think this is an interesting moment sort of in entrepreneurship, but then for us, because we acquired this company about a year ago, and now we're in the midst of really making changes. Where at the beginning, we were kind of observing, hands off, and now we're getting our hands dirty and changing things.
Yeah, I love the way that you introduced that, because all these founders, they definitely do get to a point where when they start realizing what being the CEO of a company means, it's like, that's not what I want. That's not necessarily why I started this. But I think with the space that we play in as MetaVolve is for those people that do want to be CEOs, those founders that do want to transition to be CEOs, and helping them build this, because they built this business, they built this product, they built this customer base, but taking it to that next level. And I love the fact that, like, for you, it's the other side of that lens, and it's let's just acquire your business and we'll take it and run. But I think, Jake, do you want to just give a bit about how you got to where you are now, where you purchased Lanteria? And, I want to just give a bit of the background to buying the business. I think you've given the more macro answer to it, but you personally, and why that business specifically?
So, I mean, I worked in private equity in turnarounds back in like 2005 to 2010. I then was sort of like a fractional CFO in San Francisco for software companies. I traveled a lot, met my wife, ended up living here in Barcelona, where I live now. We started our own company. I built my company from 0 to 1, went through that experience, went through all the difficulties. And when we sold our company in 2019, I decided I don't want to do that again. Like, the 0 to 1 phase for me was hellish, and I didn't want to deal with it. And I'd known about sort of search funds, and obviously I knew about private equity before that. And I knew there was sort of a frame of entrepreneurship that was outside of the norm, like the startup norm, where it's like, hey, I'm going to go raise VC funding. And I decided I'm going to go find a business. I'm going to acquire it. I knew the business needed to be profitable. I knew it was going to be in software because I wanted to work remotely. And I knew there were certain things I didn't want to touch, like MarTech, FinTech, things like that are super hot. The valuations were going to be too high. It was going to be too hard to close out a deal. And I was out there for probably 18 to 24 months looking at businesses. I read what's called a CIM, a confidential information memorandum. It's basically like the information about the business that the brokers or people give you. I read probably 2,000 of those. Kind of to understand the market. I was reading things from 500K ARR to 50 million ARR. So I was looking at things all over the place, just to understand, like, what does the market look like? What are people asking for? So when Lanteria came to me, and the opportunity was really clear, like it was clear that the valuation, the opportunity, the market size, the valuation that they were proposing was way outside the norm of what I was seeing in all these other deals. And I knew at that moment, like, this is the deal. Like, we have to go after it. And it was confirmed when I went out to look for capital. I live in front of a park in front of my house, and I would go out at night, and I still do for other reasons, but I go out at night and make all my phone calls just walking up and down in the park. And I would just dial for dollars. I would call investors and, email them, set up calls, talk to them. And the investors that invested in our company, it took 15 minutes total to convince them to invest in the deal, because the valuation was good, the market was good, and they were already software investors. They said, I get it. Like, this is outside the norm. Perfect. Send me the due diligence package and we'll wire the money once you guys are in closing. So it was just an outside the norm kind of acquisition that we got lucky to find, but also spent a lot of time, building up those reps to get there.
Sure. I mean, I'm just blown away by the fact that you were able to convince them within 15 minutes, because there's so many founders that struggle to raise funding over months. Can you give me like the 2-minute version of that 15 minutes, just to like get it? Because I really want to get a sense of not just only how great this business is, but how you position the language around it in a way that's convincing.
So, I mean, the easiest thing was we were getting it at a good multiple, and we were not trying to take advantage of the people that we were looking for money from. So we said, we're going to buy this at 1x revenue. Basically, that was what we came to. The company had been flat in sales for about 5 or 6 years. It did have a pretty heavy component of like service business. So like they're doing implementation, customizations, which, a lot of software investors don't want to deal with. They view the ARR as like the gold. But I actually view the customizations and implementation as a way to lock customers in, and actually creates long-term value that some people just don't realize that's an important, it's something you sacrifice, but it's something you get in the future. But part of the pitch to this was that, like, we're going to buy it at this multiple. You're going to buy in at, the same valuation. We're not going to take advantage of you. You're getting a software business that's solid, doing over 1 million ARR, and you're going to be buying it for, 1.6 million, basically. And for them, they said like, okay, but what's kind of the catch? Obviously, it's kind of locked into the Microsoft ecosystem. But we told them this Microsoft ecosystem has doubled in the last 2 years. Like some people would look at us and be like, Microsoft, like why Microsoft? And you tell them Microsoft Teams users is up like 75%. The Microsoft 365 user base is doubled. We're getting into this cheap price. It's a product that we know how to sort of build into the future, and it's in HR, which is a market that's been raising tons of capital. A lot of capital's flooded into this market, and it's clearly in a growth phase. And the LTV for customers is super long. We have a lot of customers staying on 6-7 years. They're locked in, and it's an attractive business. So when they you juxtapose that to, hey, we're an AI company or we're a Web3 company or something like that, and we have nothing and we're raising at a 15 million valuation. They were like, yeah, I mean, if these guys, this isn't going to be a grand slam, but this is a very easy double or triple that we can hit with limited downside because it's a company that's been around for 12 years. It's profitable. And, worst case scenario is we get out of this and make a little bit of money, but in a best case scenario, we're able to actually grow it and, multiply it by 3, 4, 5.
I love the point that you made, because it's borderline counter narrative around the fact that we're talking about ARR or even MRR when a lot of founders are pitching to investors for that. It's such an important thing, but if you look at what's underneath that metric, what you're really talking about is customer retention. And essentially, what is your like profitability per customer that you are retaining? But the point there is that, like, if you've got a lower ARR or MRR but a longer LTV, then it's kind of a no-brainer, because the point is, if you're giving these metrics around like MRR and ARR that are really high, but like they stay for a year and then leave, is that really a business that you want to get into? Because then your churn is constantly so high.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a point that I really want to highlight and mention here, is the fact that is like the metrics that you're putting on top of these, at the basis of it is this business retaining customers well? And if the answer is yes, then acquiring new customers becomes a lot less difficult, because the values are
it's less
obvious.
costly. You can amortize that cost over a longer time.
100%. Okay, so that's very clear. Cool. So I've gotten a bit of a sense in terms of why you did this, you personally as Andrew got into this business, why this business specifically that you did that, what you were looking for in terms of purchasing it. And I think I just want to like really highlight the point of, because you've been in the space of taking it from 0 to 1, and it's like, now you don't really want to do that again. Can you unpack that for me? Because there's this almost romanticism of starting a business from scratch, but that's, it's really difficult, versus the point of, it's like acquiring a good business and taking it to the next level. Just talk me through your own personal feelings in that situation, right? Having done both.
So, I mean, anecdotally, my experience, so we started an eyewear company. My wife patented a pair of sunglasses. We had to go out. I mean, we were driving around southern Spain in like a smart car, talking to plastics manufacturers to convince them to take on our project, to build molds with us, do the plastic injections. And finally, we did this for like 2 weeks. We were down in the south of Spain, driving around looking for something, because we didn't trust the Chinese. We didn't know what to do. So we're driving around. We finally convinced this crazy guy that owns like a toy company to produce our product. And we start producing it. We have absolutely no idea what we're doing. Like we found like random plastics that were flexible. We basically invented this piece of product. And then once we had it, it was like, well, now what do we do? Now how do we sell it? And so we ended up opening a store here in Barcelona. That went semi-successfully. We're like a small store in a small corner. We convinced investors to then invest in a bigger store. And we opened another store there. And then we started getting people that would come in off the streets and buy our glasses and then say like, hey, I want to bring these to Dubai. Can I open a franchise there? And then we had to learn about building a franchise. Like, what is a franchising business? How does it work? How do you negotiate the margins? And all of this, then all of a sudden you get one of the franchises, like a Venezuelan guy that ends up disappearing with a bunch of glasses. there's all these like pitfalls that come along with the 0 to 1 journey. And in all this time, you're not like building a company, you're just putting out fires and like trying to make sure that, someone doesn't steal all your stuff, or that the capital you just invested doesn't just get evaporated because, your store, stops getting foot traffic or it's seasonal. So there's all these pitfalls that you aren't really building a business or building this like structure of like, hey, how do I, set goals or set priorities for my team, or how it's just this like mass chaos all the time, which it still is like where we are, even when you're over 1 million. But I didn't want to deal with it. And I didn't want to go from like zero of like taking an idea, putting it on paper, and then doing that whole process and all the brain damage that went with it. Maybe I could do it again after this experience, but for the next experience, it's like it was like trauma, like a trauma experience where it's like I can't do it. I got to find another way. And for me, what I was good at was talking to investors, communicating with them. Like even now, I send monthly updates. I kind of go through like all the pros and cons of things that have happened this month. I send the P&L, send the balance sheet. And our investors always say to me, like, this is the best update that I get every month. And I'm getting updates from like companies that are doing 100 million ARR. And they're like, these ones go far beyond that because all the other ones are trying to go into these details. And like, you're just telling us like what's going on and being honest about it, like the good and the bad. And that's where I feel like I excel more. And so I knew that. And yeah, I just wasn't playing to my strengths in that 0 to 1 phase.
And yeah, I love the fact that you introduced that, because I've got a very strong opinion that most entrepreneurs aren't cut out to be the CEOs of their companies. I think they can be if they do a lot of like personal and leadership development, and like, they completely start shifting some perspectives on what you think is important, and also handing over power and delegating, like a lot that you need to change personally in order to get there.
Oh yeah, it's an internal journey, definitely.
Yeah. But now there's this Venn diagram that I have in my head now around the fact that being a founder and being a CEO, and they overlap, and there's a small percentage of people that are really amazing at doing both and also love doing both. But the point is like you've got a lot of people that love being a founder and are good at starting things and like love starting things and then like moving them on and starting the next thing because they love the chaos. And then you get the other people that is like, I really want to be a CEO, and like I like having that job. I like scaling this thing, and I like doing that. So it's almost the point of where on the one side it's like I like the process of starting an idea and building it from scratch, versus I actually just like the job of a CEO and I'm pretty good at it too. Where's the right context for me to do that?
And I found also inside of that Venn diagram, I have like another area where, what we're trying to focus on is sort of special situations and turnarounds. So you're dealing with a lot of chaos because, Lanteria, like I said, it was profitable, stable. It was very optimized for the previous owner's profitability and for their comfort. So that's where the lack of growth came in, because they weren't pushing anyone. They weren't setting objectives. They weren't setting goals. And that created sort of an environment of just, things are easy, things are fine. And now as we are making these changes, and I'm creating chaos myself inside of the company, but because it needs change, and you'll fire people and they'll criticize you and they'll say, this isn't how you run a company. You say, yeah, but this company's not growing and you're not bringing that mentality to the company. So we need to, create a shock inside of the company to wake people up and bring them to like where we need to go. And so it is, it does kind of put you back in that 0 to 1 phase, but with more infrastructure, more revenue, and more like capacity around you. But it does make it fun. Like I do create chaos once in a while. But what you're saying about that introspective journey, I actually spent the first year of being CEO doing a lot of like coaching, doing some courses, things like that, because you don't realize that in the 0 to 1 journey, that next phase is about you letting go, expanding, delegating, giving, having confidence to set the goals, set the structures, and let other people, do that work. And that's been a lot of my journey, like the last 12 months is kind of learning about myself and learning about what am I good at? What am I not? Who can I hire? What can they do?
This podcast is brought to you by MetaVolve, for founders who are committed to scaling their business, but are tired of wearing 12 different hats. For founders who want to focus on their next stage of growth, but are worried about their customer and employee satisfaction. MetaVolve helps you build the structures, systems, and management team that you need to elevate yourself out of operations. It's time to free yourself up to focus on growth. Do it now with the entrepreneurial partners that put your customers, and your people at the core of your scaling strategy. Let's evolve, empowering leaders, evolving businesses. And I want to specify what I meant by the chaos there, because in my opinion, the chaos is normal. Okay, like changes, like the change is the only constant in life and the universe. But the point there is that when you're in the 0 to 1 phase, your chaos is both external and internal, because you're doing all these roles and jobs and hats that you are constantly learning on the spot. While when you're in the CEO role, and the point is, it's like, I can talk about it whether you're acquiring a business or you're scaling your own one. But the point is there's no longer that internal chaos. As long as you're competent, let me put it that way. As long as you're competent at the job, you don't have that internal chaos, and that external chaos you become more of a facilitator of.
Yeah, you're right. And you try and bring in the right people. I mean, a lot of it is finding the right people at the right moment and identifying when the people from the previous phase, like I know a lot of founders, and for them, the hardest part has been the guy that, or the woman that got me, from 1 million to 5 million, the marketing person or the salesperson. And we hit that stage, and all of a sudden it's like, this person really isn't a good fit for this role anymore. The CMO that was there when they were the only marketing person, for example. And the hardest phase for a lot of entrepreneurs is, when do I cut ties there? How do I do it? And, what does that phase look like? And I've seen a lot of people fail there. People that I've become friends with over the past few years. And that's what I'm trying to sort of learn from, is like, identify those moments and identify it in yourself to say, like, where am I lacking? And how can I bring someone in to sort of fill that role?
Yeah, and it's the whole the quote of, what got you here isn't going to get you there, but it's also the people that got you here aren't the people that are going to get you there as well.
And it's really hard. Like you have to cut ties, because sometimes it's almost like a family. You're 10, 15 people. And it's like, well, this person, they just don't have that. Especially, it's like a management skill. It's like, this person's really good at marketing, but they're not a manager. And I mean, even in big organizations, the biggest mistakes is people turning really good individual contributors into managers just because they were the best individual contributor. And there's no track for these really good individual contributors, or the individual contributor isn't willing to give up the power that they had in that role to say, hey, I'm really good at just outbound marketing. Let's bring in a real CMO and I'll continue to do this. But they can't let it go. It's like, this is my baby. This is my, I created that messaging, and the new person's changing it. And it's really hard for people to step out of that ego and let people do it. I don't see it happen very often.
And I'd argue the reason why it doesn't happen very often is because the founder hasn't been able to do it for themselves and role model that change.
Yeah.
Because the point is, it's a lot easier to follow in the footsteps of someone, of changing your role and niching it into where you're good. Because the thing is, I still stand by, like, a lot of founders aren't cut out to be CEO, but they are the best person for either chief growth officer or chief product officer. Hands down, without a doubt. Like, no one can do that job better than you. Like, you can't hire a replacement for you there. And the thing is like, if you're able to show that change with, like, grace and maturity, and showing your ability to learn and adapt to that, and also hand over and role model that, your ability to do that with other people and keep that core team that have helped you get here, but repurpose them for something more specialized, is now possible. But I don't think it is possible the other way, without having done it yourself first.
I agree. And I think that's where, like, CEO peer groups and doing certain courses and talking to certain people it's really the only way to get yourself in that position and actually be ready to make that transition, or to identify it. Because some people, it's amazing. I talk to people, they're like blind to it, and you'll hear them talking about their role or how they do things, and you'll be like, why are you even doing that? You don't even like it. Like, why are you still running all this stuff? Instead of just saying, like, hey, let's bring it, because there are people in the market that are really good at building these structures, doing this stuff. And you can, like you said, focus on growth or focus on product, which is usually, what got you there, is the person's either really good at marketing or knows the product better than anyone.
And that's the reality about human beings, is that even if one can, I'd say, intellectually or with a worldview, have a good relationship with change, people are inherently not wired to change well, especially like their personality and ways of thinking. So because, like, what you're highlighting there is that with these founders, and they've taken on all these jobs and wearing all these hats in the business, and it's like, you don't like this. You're not good at this. Why
Yeah.
do you keep doing it? And the point is, like, I can't give you a good answer, but the point is, like, my like wiring is just telling me that I can't change. And that's
Yeah.
that you need to kind of fight that that inertia in someone's own desire to change.
Yeah. And I mean, even I read a lot like from investors and things like that. And I think, public markets investors and even private market investors can give a good insight to that type of change, because a lot of the best investors, they will change their opinion or change their positioning in 5 minutes. If somebody gives them a good argument and a good reasoning for something, they'll say like, interesting. Yeah, you might be right there. And I've read investors that have changed their entire portfolio because one person pointed something out to them, and they'll say, you're right, I'm probably on the wrong side of this, and now I'm going to change my opinion quickly. And for me, that's one of the key things. I have no real ego in this. And I even this week I fired someone, and she was telling me that you're wrong, like you should not be firing me. And I told you might be right, but this is from talking to a lot of people, gathering a lot of information. This is the best informed opinion I can make from what they told me. And, in 6 months, I might regret it, but I'll learn from the experience. Like I already learned just this week from like thinking about it. I'm like, okay, I did this wrong with this person. I did this wrong. So the next person I bring on, I'm going to have to do it this way to try and get better. Or I'm going to have to hire someone else that's going to be better than me at doing this. And it takes that sort of, you just have to be humble about it and be like, hey, you might be wrong. And if you're wrong, you just have to learn. That's it.
So I've got a hypothesis around the fact that it's a lot easier to do that when it's not the company you started. But before I think diving down that rabbit hole, I think where I want to enter the topic now is, what's the difference between scaling a company that you started versus scaling a company that you've acquired? Like personally, how have you experienced the difference?
I mean, one of the biggest differences is in the team. You do feel less attachment to the team. That thing that we were just talking about of, the person that got you to here probably isn't the person to get you there. When you don't have that emotional attachment to the person, a lot of the attachment you have to them is more from their knowledge and their history with the company. To say, if I get rid of this person, I'm losing some pretty important knowledge about the company that I might not know. There's a lot, you step into a company, there's a lot of blind spots. It's like, you don't know 100% of what happened. You don't know 100% of the code base. You don't know 100% of like what they did in marketing before. You don't know what their sales executives, did before. So if you get rid of that, that's institutional knowledge that you're losing. So a lot of the attachment you have to the employees is just knowledge, where for a founder, the attachment is emotional, where it's, I paid this person maybe less than they deserved. They bet on me. I bet on them. And you have that emotional attachment where for me, it's more of, I can let go of this person. I'll be able to sleep at night. So it makes it easier there in that really difficult phase. And I would say, frankly, people are the most difficult part of building any business. And so the emotional attachment not being there makes it easier to interchange people in that initial phase of like an acquisition. So I would say for me, that's the biggest difference from the two is really in the people phase. I would say the next one is you do get to come into something that's built and has an infrastructure, has a structure, has like a body to it, and look at it from like a third party perspective, which a lot of times founders can't do when they've built something up, is say, okay, let's take a step back. We've hit 1 million ARR. Now, what do we need to do? And a lot of times you just keep going. Like you just keep doing the same things and you can't figure out why it's not working. You don't step back, you don't pause. Where when you do this, I mean, the first thing we do is just step back, not really do anything for like 3 or 4 months, like just watch and observe and listen, and then kind of come up with a plan of an attack. We did small things. There was like low hanging fruit. They were like, okay, we could probably take some revenue out here. But yeah, that for me was the best part, is just, you took a step back, you watched what people were doing. You're like, why are they doing this? Like, why would we do this? And then it's difficult to actually implement it because they're like, well, they're saying to you, why are you proposing this? This is how we do things. Yeah, you're doing this and it's not growing. And they don't see why those two things are related. It's like, we're not growing because of this. It's like, no. There's a whole reason why this company's not growing, but I took a step back, I'm looking at it, and this is something that I've identified.
100%. And I think what's reinforcing my humility hypothesis now is what you've said about kind of coming in, and you mentioned that institutional knowledge. It's also the mindset around when you coming into a business you've acquired, and it's easy to go around as like, listen, you all know this business better than I do, like by a mile. It's going to take me a long time for me to understand that well. But when you're the person that started it, it's like no one knows this business better than I do.
Yeah.
And with that, it's very difficult to kind of like succumb your ego or your willpower or your intellect to another person, because as the founder, you've always got that thing to fall back on as like, no one knows this business better than I do, which is also factually correct.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I mean, I would say my position's a little bit different than maybe I know other people that are sort of serial private equity investors or acquirers, that they do, or even there are people that are like, get their MBA, go raise a fund, go acquire some companies. And there's definitely a lot of hubris in their approach to things, where it's like, hey, I have a game plan that I learned at Stanford, and we're going to apply this game plan to this company. And oftentimes it doesn't fit. Or there are people I know that they have their playbook. They acquire a company, this is our playbook. And you say, well, how can you adjust the playbook? And they're like, well, we usually adjust it like every 2 to 3 years. We kind of revisit it. But like marketing changes at the speed of light. Like what worked for like outbound marketing 18 months ago doesn't work right now. And those playbooks need to be rewritten. And a lot of times people step in and just rip up everything and say, no, this is the playbook, we're going this way. And that's also not the right way to approach it.
Yeah, personally, I don't really believe in playbooks unless they're operational in nature. And the reason why is the value of a playbook is the context it's applied to. Otherwise, it can be counterproductive if applied in the wrong context. I think things that transcend context are frameworks, and there's certain frameworks and ways to think about things. But trying to get a playbook and apply it to different businesses in different markets with different contexts and different strategies is just like expecting the same results is ignorant, maybe even naive.
Yeah. You're right. There's different contexts of businesses, markets, employees that are there. And I mean, I've seen some people struggle because they just try and fit square pegs into round holes and say, this is the playbook. And they hammer their heads against it. They try and get the same employees to do something different, which might be difficult for them. Or they immediately go out and hire new employees too early and alienate all the people that have that institutional knowledge, or all the people that have sort of built this business. And, they look at everything from a spreadsheet rather than, I mean, people are the main driver of any company. There are frameworks, there are systems, there are ways to get people to do things. But in the end of the day, the people are going to execute your plan. And if you're not going to make them excited about that or interested, and you just look at it as a spreadsheet, it's going to blow up in your face.
And that's the point, is there's no substitute for good leadership, right? There's nothing that can replace that. All right. So Andrew, been an insightful conversation. I now want to get practical, right? I want to find out, like, you obviously bought the saw an opportunity, going to take it to the next level, going to get a good return. What was your strategy in the beginning, right? In terms of scaling the business? Like, let's talk me first through the first, what was your intention walking in? And then how did you execute that in the first 6 months?
So my intention walking in was, I knew this was sort of my path. I knew that, I was close to being 40. I was like 37, 38 at the time. And I knew I saw like a vision, like the next 10 years, this is what I'm going to do. Not necessarily Lanteria, but I'm going to be doing, acquisitions. I really liked the HR space. And I said, this is kind of where I'm going to focus my attention. At the same time, I knew that I wasn't, from a leadership position or a leadership perspective, I was not up to par for where the company was at. So like I said, I did kind of go out, find peer groups, find, courses and ways to sort of learn, because I knew I'd be stepping into a situation where we had 15 employees, we were trying to grow to like 30 employees over the next few years.
Before or after you acquired?
This was when we were acquired. So before, when I identified the company, I knew this was kind of like direction I was going to go into. and I was going to focus on acquisitions. When we found, and I knew that I wanted to get into this size of company. So like a company that was doing, I didn't want to buy companies that were doing like 50K MRR, 50K ARR and be too small. I wanted to get into companies that had a certain size, certain structure, and a certain positioning, like I said, sort of like a turnaround, or it needed, some updating. So when I knew I needed to get in there, I also knew I needed to like update myself, update what I was going to do. So I did try and, get better at leadership, understand sort of these structures, understand things. And I knew from the beginning, like I have certain deficiencies in the way I work because the way I am. I think like everything I do, I have ownership in it. Like if you tell me to do something, it's like I feel an ownership in that. And if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the best possible way I can. Where, sometimes employees need like a specific structure and say, hey, you have to do it this way, and this way. And they have to be, explain sort of the process that needs to go into it. But I'm not that way naturally. So I need to kind of learn, how to communicate goals, how to communicate structures, how to communicate things to people. So that was part of like the first phase. The next phase, when we, were in the acquisition.
Sorry, if action actually just to dive in for a second, is like, I really want to know, what was your approach to developing yourself as like a self-guided leadership development? You mentioned coaches, you mentioned courses. What coaching did you receive? What courses did you go on?
So I did one course. I'd actually mentioned you before when we were talking. There's one course at a school called ESE here in Barcelona that it's like a top MBA program in Europe, but they launched a new course for scale up founders. So I was in the first cohort last year. They launched like right after we acquired the company. So they basically got there was 25 founders from around Europe. They brought them into this course, and every sprint, they would do sprints of 3 days, every like 6 to 8 weeks. And every sprint was about something specific, but a lot of it, like from day one, was about leadership. And I was totally blind to this area. So they would bring in like really high-end coaches. They brought in, what's his name? Jerry, I can't think of his last name. They brought in like really impressive coaches because the guy that runs the program has like a really big network and would call in favors. Basically, he's friends with like Vern Harnish. So like Vern Harnish came and spent 2 days with us and like did his CEO summit, but for like a fraction of the price, because it was just part of like the whole course. And at the same time, we had our own coaches. We had our own peer groups, like CEO peer groups, where you get together. And from the first week of doing that, like the CEO peer group, they basically said like, you need to tell these people in this room things that you haven't told anyone ever in your life. And you'd sit down with someone new and you'd explain like your whole life to them. And then all of a sudden you felt like totally comfortable to say to them, like, this is what I suck at. And I'm so scared. And people would be vulnerable about what they were, dealing with and what the issues they had personally, professionally with their company. And for me, it was so shocking because I went in thinking I was going to get all these tactics. And really like the first, I'd say 3 months was just about yourself, discovering yourself, your leadership, what you're good at, what you're not good at. We did a thing called Leadership Circle, which is a really interesting tool where you evaluate yourself, your employees evaluate you, your investors evaluate you. And, the more people you get, the better it is. But it tells you, the part below in the Leadership Circle is the reactive self, and the part above is the proactive self. And you want to have more weight on the proactive, but you also learn that the reactive in doses and in certain ways of harnessing it is good. And so I had a very good proactive one, but I was very blind on being like people pleasing. So the way I would want my employees to work for me is to make them feel good to do something. Where authoritative, I was like zero. It was like I couldn't be authoritative. And so the coaches would teach you like, you don't need to become an authoritarian, but you have a lot of room here to drop the hammer on certain things, and people will listen.
Be more assertive.
Yeah, be more assertive, and people would listen. They would say, it would come at them like they're evaluating you, saying like, this guy's a lot of room to be more authoritative, and you need to step in. And then this also teaches you around your blind spots. You'd say, okay, I hate I hate people that are authoritarian. Like I'm an entrepreneur, so I don't want people telling me what to do. And therefore I have this blind spot, like a shadow, they call it, where I can't be authoritarian either. And it creates this weird dynamic inside of you that as you learn it and as you identify it and try and work on it, then you get better. And so this course really helped me, like identifying certain things. I'm still bad at some of it, but you at least know, and you have the tools to get better. And in the end, you realize like a lot of being a CEO is that it's just managing people's expectations, managing your own personality, managing your deficiencies, trying to, get better and lead people. And it was a really transformational thing. And we would do classes like Gaudi, the famous architect. We would go to the Sagrada Familia, and there would be a professor that was like an expert on him. And he just taught like, how did this guy die? And this is still being built 150 years later. Like, what is it about his leadership skills and what he instilled in people that did this? So a lot of things like that. So I did that. And then I continued sort of working with some of the coaches from there, like personally, to, work on some of these blind spots and work on some of these areas. And a lot of it is also just like, why are you doing this? Why are you chasing this? What is it about you that, you're not just going to go get a job at a bank and sit there all day? And you realize these things and you dig into it, and it's like a never-ending journey. Like anyone that's been in like therapy, that you're never going to stop. You just keep trying to push it forward, because eventually you're going to do something. You're going to fall. You're going to get back up. You're going to keep pushing, and you learn that like a lot of building companies isn't just being awesome at product, awesome at marketing. It's this whole other level of who you are, and it helps you in like my personal life. It's helped like with my wife, with my kids, identifying certain things. So that was the main thing that I did over the last year, and that ended in May. But yeah, it was super transformational. It was like the perfect time, like stepping into this role, stepping into this journey. And I actually made some really good friends from like the other fellow CEOs there. That was one of the byproducts that I didn't expect. Like, you thought you're going to go there and learn about finance and growing companies and structures, and it was basically nothing about that.
Yeah, that's incredible. So there's two things I want to mention. Is if you've got a leader that doesn't value self-actualization, there's going to come a point where the context outgrows that leader. That's number one. Number two, I had a very interesting conversation with someone yesterday who's written a book on leadership, and he taught me that there's 5 main like clusters of competencies around what makes leadership. It's creativity, critical thinking, social intelligence, self-management, and attention management. And if you look at that in terms of like, how is it that I self-control myself, how I get out of the bed in the morning, what my routines are, my understanding and empathy of other people, my ability to make good decisions, my coming up with or like interesting opportunities and innovative solutions, it's all there. So I just want to put a pin in that, because I found that really, really insightful.
Interesting.
So I love the fact that you call it phase 1, because I'd almost call that phase 0 of your scaling journey, because the point is like, this before you even got in, like, this is the plan, this is where I'm going. So okay, so now you've done that, you've done your own leadership development in terms of yourself, in terms of your own education, your knowledge. What did the next step look like?
So as I said before, we didn't really touch anything in the business. There were things like, I would go to this course and sometimes you would get ideas and you'd say, we need to get really way better at customer feedback. So we would reach out to a lot of customers and try and talk to them. And, there were certain tactical things there that I would learn, but for the most part, we didn't touch very much of the business. We identified a couple areas where we could get a lot of revenue from previous customers that like just weren't being, we weren't tapping into certain revenue enough. So we hired a few extra people, a few extra developers to go tap into some of that revenue that would allow us to kind of grow a little bit more and reinvest. But we didn't touch very much. I kind of made the mistake early on. We hired a new marketing director. We brought in this guy from another company, and I didn't vet him enough or think through it enough, because I knew we just needed to make a change. We needed to shake things up. So like 4 or 5 months in, we hired him, and 4 or 5 months later, we fired him, because it was like he was just lighting money on fire. That was really the only major change we made. And then after sort of evaluating the overall company, seeing how people were behaving, seeing how people were reacting, we brought on a new CTO earlier this summer who has made a huge difference. Like, he was able to step in, sort of organize the team better, organize the chaos that had been created when the previous owners kind of stepped out. We had elevated one of the senior developers to more of a leadership role. He wasn't really ready for that. And when we brought someone else in, it created a lot more calm, a lot more enthusiasm from the team about like the direction of where things were going, and allowed me to focus more on just like the growth side of the business. And over the last, I'd say 4 or 5 months, it has been a lot of shift, like ripping things down to the studs on the growth and on the marketing side, because sometimes you do get this feeling of like, am I going in the wrong direction? Should I be giving these people more time? But when you go to like peer groups or you talk to other people, experts in certain areas, you do get some clarity and say, hey, this isn't the way things should be done. And if you're not getting the people that are currently in the team to change, then you need to change the people in the team. And that's what we've been doing a lot the last 3 or 4 months. Even just this week, I fired the current the woman that had been the marketing manager for about 8 years within the company. I just said to her, we're investing money and there's nothing coming out of it. And when I talk to other people that are in your position and other places, they're telling me all this stuff that we should be doing that we aren't doing, or that you're not executing on. That she would say things but not execute on it. And it came to a point where I just said, she was a key piece of the team. And one of my concerns was always like the destabilization of the team. You fire certain key people and everyone starts worrying about, their job. Is it the budget? Is it this? Is it that? And one of the key things I've done is every time we've fired someone, I'll make a Loom video and, send it to the whole team, explain what the reasoning was, what the decision was, why we did this, explain basically exactly what I told to the other person in private, and allow them to then reach out to me privately and say if they disagree, if they want to discuss, if they want to hear why. And sometimes people do and sometimes people don't, but that for me at least has given some transparency to the process, especially when you're remote. People just kind of disappear into the ether, like they're Slack. They just disappear from Slack. They don't like pack up their things and walk out of the office. So you have to be kind of gentle, especially some of these people have been together for like 8-9 years in this company. So it's difficult to make some of these changes, but oftentimes necessary.
And what would you say, the presence to the next 12 to 18 months looks like for you?
So we need more money. That's one of the key things to actually hire the people. I mean, one of the hardest parts is we made one other critical error. We raised enough money to basically buy the business. And our plan in June of 2022 was, we're going to raise this capital. We're going to step in, we're going to evaluate the business, and then we're going to go out with a plan that will allow us to have a little bit better valuation from future investors, rather than the original investors that were taking on a lot of risk, because a lot of the team was in Ukraine, previous owners were in Ukraine, we're bringing on debt, we're doing all this, we're a new team. They took on a lot of risk. And we thought, if we can de-risk this business, we can go out to the market, raise it a higher valuation. And what happened was, obviously 6 months later, went out to the market had collapsed. Nobody was looking to invest in anything. And now we're in this position where it's like, okay, what do we do? What do we do next? And the business is profitable. We can keep going in this direction, but we need to hire professionals and people that sort of know what they're doing. And we're not looking to raise a lot. We're looking to raise $500,000 to $1 million that allow us to, bring in some solid people that, can push growth, can push, better development, help us develop our product faster than where we are right now, just bootstrapping it. So that's one of the key pieces we're at. I'm currently rebuilding our sales and marketing team. I mean, we have basically no sales and marketing team as of this week. So I'm rebuilding that, talking to a lot of people, fractional CMOs or fractional people that can come in, some junior people, but rebuilding that process and bringing in sort of a new account executive in North America that can help us there. And then one of my key focuses on partnerships is bringing in, we have some really good channel partners. And that's a strategy that I think we can duplicate over the next few years. And it's one of the key initiatives I'm working on, is just finding exactly the rep that we have in Australia and actually in South Africa, and finding those people in Singapore, Middle East, Latin America, and helping them, helping us grow the business through them.
That sounds like you really got this scaling strategy down. I think there's a couple of curveballs, but with your humility and adaptation, you've Yeah, you don't just sound confident, you sound calm. It's like, this is just what needs to be done. So
Yeah.
Andrew, thank you very much for the enlightening, practical, inspiring conversation. I just have one more question for you. And that's,
Yeah.
what's the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I guess I kind of mentioned like, what is the biggest mistake that people make in, buying or selling companies, maybe if it's more of like a practical kind of thing that people are out there for. And I would say, I was actually with a friend of mine last week. We were on vacation and he sold his company a few weeks ago. And the one thing that made the biggest difference was he did not care if the person bought or did not buy his company. So he went into the process. They approached him and he went into the process and just didn't care. Like they would send him due diligence packages, questions, and he would just say like, no, I'm not going to fill that out. And they would be like, okay. And he's like, if you want to buy the company, you can buy the company. I'm going to keep running it if you don't buy it. So I don't really care. He's like, you can make me an offer. I'll give you any legal things that you want to review. But he's like, I'm not going to sit here and fill out, volumes of documents for you because I don't care if you buy it or not. And that mentality makes a huge difference. So if you are trying to sell or exit, first of all, make sure you built structures. Make sure you built, what we're talking about, like a leadership team. Make sure that there's a structure in place where it can scale or that the product, can run on its own. Because what people want to acquire is something that can be standalone. They don't want to acquire a headache. They want to acquire something that they can kind of plug in from day one. But at the same time, make sure that you have what's called like your BATNA. Like you don't care. What's your worst case scenario in going into the negotiation? And if it's, I don't sell the company and you don't care, then that's totally fine. And that's going to get you the best valuation possible.
That's some very strong bargaining leverage.
Yeah.
Andrew, thank you very much. Wishing you all the best and can't wait to see how you take your company to the next level.
Thanks, Cameron. It was great to be here.
Sure, I'm both amazed at the similarity, but also the difference between scaling your own company versus scaling one that you've acquired. And the same things need to be put in place. The whole point that we were making and discussing around, what got you here isn't going to get you there. The people that got you here aren't the people that are going to get you there. And the systems and the structures that you need to put in place, the way that you need to rethink your product and your market and take new approaches towards revenue, getting external insights and perspectives. How it is that you can take your business forward requires a lot of the same formulas in terms of changes that need to be made and maturing the business. But I think the fascinating difference that's highlighted there is just that the CEO versus founder dynamic, and having that identity and relationship with the business, but also with the people, that to be able to have that emotionally distanced perspective of being an outsider coming in. You can lean on people internally for their knowledge and expertise, but you can also make the hard decisions without a lot of bias. Well, the problem is when you're scaling it yourself, you're still very biased by what's happened in the past, the relationships that you have currently. And I think that's regardless of the leadership development to become, a better CEO, which I think Andrew's a great indicator of that journey and how to go about doing that really well, and the self-insights and knowledge to do so. It's just that real difficulty of removing yourself and trying to have an unbiased perspective of your company, which is exceptionally hard, but I think also very necessary for that scaling stage. So yeah, I think I got a lot out of this. I hope you did too. And if there's any specific questions or anything that you found really insightful, would love to hear it. Please drop it in the comments or contact us directly. But until the next episode, enjoy, and I'll see you then.